Hello my dear friends, how are you doing? I'm Babak, and in this mini crash course we are going to create a web server with the Dart language using the super useful and lightweight Vania framework. Vania framework is similar to Django and Laravel frameworks, and in this mini crash course you will be taught how to become a full stack developer, and in the end you will see this application. So Flutter developers can use Vania easily, but other developers that are interested in this framework must download the Dart SDK to start. So let's get started. Okay guys, once open the Dart address in your browser, you will come across the fundamental description of this framework. In the remainder of the introduction, one is robust backend framework designed for building high-performance web application using Dart, and let's not delay and proceed to install this framework right away. Okay, make sure your Dart version between 3 and 4 before installing the Vania CLI or Vania command line interface. Choose your directory. For example, I choose my directory inside the directory, and then paste your commands here. Once the command line interface is installed, it's time to select the name for your backend project. Copy this command and paste it here. I will delete the blog and instead name it note_Vania and press enter. Okay, everything seems to be in order. Before running the server, we need to navigate to the root folder of the project by using the change directory command and write Vania serve to serving our server. Okay, now copy this address and paste it in your browser. This will display the welcome message. Hello world, welcome to full stack development with Vania as the default. Then by pressing Ctrl C, we exit the save mode, and we want to see this project in Android Studio IDE. Okay, open Android Studio. Also, you can open this project in VS Code or other code editors. And before I want to tell you the structure of the project, let me run the server again in the terminal. Write Vania serve, then refresh browser. Okay, it works properly. And now I want to tell you the structure of project. We have bin folder, and inside bin folder we have application initialization with default configuration. Typically, we won't utilize this directory much. The folder we will primarily work with is this library folder, and inside library folder we have route. Also, this message is the same one displayed in HTML format on the initial route. Here we have the route for the WebSocket protocol, which is utilized for real-time tasks. However, we won't be using it in this project. Now we have reached the interesting discussion about the API route, where we aim to build a REST API. We have the route named home, which is linked to the home controller for initialization. We have this method here for initialization of this router. Then let's copy this route name and append it next to the URL. If you notice that it shows us that this route doesn't exist, it's because we have a method to define the base prefix and we have set its value to API. Therefore, we need to call this address like this: API and home. Okay. Following that, we have several other routes that outline the features of Vania further. For instance, if you take note of this example, if we append the name wrong request to the URL, what happens? Right, I see. We have to wait for the change to restart the server. Okay, now restart again. Okay, your request is not valid. If you pay attention, even though the route responses are wrong requests, what we saw was different. This is because of the presence of middleware, which I will explain later on. Now copy this route name and append it next to the URL. If you notice, this displays the same value as hello world, which was exactly inside the method. If you've been a backend developer before, you probably know what middleware does, but for those who don't know, I will explain, no worry. Okay, let's create a new router ourselves. We can initialize it from the home controller or write a new method. This method can either have the async feature or not, just like other routers on this page. Now write return response, and response has several static methods that I choose here, for example HTML. Okay, wait for restarting server. Now we can test it. Write full instead of hello world. What it shows us is bar, which means it's working properly. Well, in order to put a variable inside path, we define it in this way that we put colon and write the name of the variable that we can access its value inside the parentheses of the method related to the response. And I put variable value inside response value. We can also access its value by defining the request, which I will explain in the future and upcoming videos. Okay, let's check it. Write users and 2 as the ID. Why server couldn't read its value? In my opinion, we should put the ID in brackets instead of colon. Exactly what is in Vania's documentation. Now let's check it again. Again, it seems like we have a runtime error. Okay, type int isn't a subtype of type string. Change string to int and restart server again. Okay, let's check it again. Now it works properly. Okay guys, we all know that REST API contains several method types like get, post, patch, and etc. We should use get for actions that retrieve data without side effects, and the post method for actions that change server state, such as creating or updating resources. I use post and home controller create function for its value. So let's know how middleware works. For example, home middleware is a page that we can change its value, and the middleware is a function that will have all the access for requesting an object, responding to an object, and moving to the next middleware function in the application request response cycle. Now I expect that requests for routers that include this middleware, if they don't have a value called access-token, will not proceed to the next stage. I include the abort value within the condition requiring a status code and message. The 422 status code, also known as unprocessable entity, is an HTTP response status code that indicates the server understands the type of request but can't process the instructions. Okay, paste the hello world here. It seems we should wait for restarting the server, then check it again. It works properly. But if I put a query parameters, for example, access-token here, I put my name for value of this variable, and it works. But without this variable, it shows us this result. This was a very simple example of middleware that I hope you fully understand. Let's explore further about some of Vania's valuable middleware. For instance, to send one-time passwords, we employ a middleware called Throttle, which empowers us to receive the desired number of requests within a specific time duration. In this case, I put 2 minutes for duration of Throttle, and for max attempts, I put 2. It means we can send 2 requests in 2 minutes. Before I test it, I want to change the text of response. I change it to OTP code sent successfully, and press Ctrl S to start the server. Okay, I write OTP here, and this is our first attempt, and after 2 requests, we receive too many requests. Okay guys, in addition to these, we have some other routers. For example, we cannot test this router in the browser, and we will test it in Postman in the next videos. Or for example, authentication middleware, which we will use to authenticate the user, and we have some other directories, for example, models and providers. So we have some middleware in this folder that earlier in the video, if you remember, we talked about the result of the router returning us a different value. But in order for all these routers to be known in the server, we need the service provider value, which if you look carefully, they are all set here. So my dear friends, let's create API routes. I will create some folders like API goals, and you can put version for your API, for example, version 1, 2, or some stuff like this. Then create a file. The name of this file is optional. Simply give it a name similar to the path of the folders we created. Then, similar to the rest of the routes, we create a class that implements the route class. The route class has a mandatory method that we need to initialize. Note that we need to provide an exact address for the base prefix. I'll write it again to resemble the address of the folders we created, API/auth. Then create a get method for testing this address. I can create a controller for this route. However, for now, to test this route, I will create a method with an HTML type response. So I put API auth account for this value, and note that we call this route inside the main API route. Write class name and call register method out this class name. Okay, now let's proceed to run this server. Write Vania server and for testing the API auth account, appended rest of the address. It's worked properly, but I want this route to establish its routes from its own controller. Therefore, if you look at the commands related to Vania's command line interface, we can create a controller using the make :controller command. Write Vania make :controller and write your controller name here. If you pay attention, this controller created successfully in this path. We can open it from these folders. So for now, let's consider a straightforward example of creating accounts for our users. I will include a user in the list, and I will also make sure to include the ID and the name and the email values for each user. Let's add another variable, for example, gender, to these values. If we set it to true, it indicates that this user is male. Then we can include this list in the index method. Okay, next, let's assign this method to the get method in the route we created, and write auth controller and index. Make sure you remove the parentheses of index and wait for restarting server. Okay, so refresh the browser. Great, everything is functioning correctly. Now let's create several more routers for creating, deleting, and editing. If the method type is different, we can still use the same names for the route addresses. And I use patch method to update account. Before I remove the parentheses and the content inside it, take note that it includes a request variable and an ID variable. Thus, we need to append an ID to the name of this router. Just like the previous example, we can define a variable inside the path by adding curly brackets. Now you can write request inside parentheses of create function. This is optional, but we can do it. And we can receive the values sent by the user using the request input method. However, before adding them to the list, we need to validate the data sent by the user. Now write request.validate. This method requires two input maps. I put variable names for first map. You can add required, and this variable must be an email, numeric, or alphabetic. Also, we have name inside request, values, and I put required for all of them. Also, you can add is boolean for gender. I told you this method requires two input maps. The first map is the input roles, and the second one, which is also optional, is used to specify the description of role violations in the first map. Okay, now let's add these values inside user as a new user or as a new account. Well, we create a new unique ID for the users, for the new user, so that we can distinguish it from other users. I set the ID value to 1 if the list is empty. Otherwise, I add 1 to the last user's ID. Okay, you also can get all of the variables inside request by all function, and in order to show the result to the client side, I add a boolean named success and a message to explain the result. For example, I put added successfully for the message value. So before testing it, I mentioned it earlier that we cannot test the post method in the browser. So let's open the Postman, and before all of this, I want to create a new workspace. Now press create workspace and press next button in this case. So write your workspace name. For example, I put Vania workspace. Also, I put anyone on the internet can access this workspace because I want to share this workspace with you. Then create new collection. I put my application name to this collection name, and so you can paste your base URL and base API URL inside variables. Now let's add initial value. Copy this base URL and paste in initial value section. I put a slash in the end of the initial value. Also, I put initial value for base URL. Okay, for adding base URL in this section, add curly brackets and write your variable name. Then and also write your endpoint in the rest of the base API URL. Okay, it's worked correctly. Now you can rename this request name, but before this, add a folder and name it to auth. Then move your request inside this folder. And you can rename this request name. Okay. Now let's add a new request for creating a new user. Change the method type to post, and you can copy this URL. You can specify the name of the request here and consider a description for it. Now let's send the request, and we have some error. We need to add the request body. I choose form data. You can fully understand what value it does. So I put my variables and the value of them here. For example, I put for gender true. Now let's check it again. Okay, email isn't a valid name. The gender must be a boolean. It shows this error while the value type is boolean. So in this case, we need to send the raw data. This is the same sending as JSON. So write your variable and value of them here again. and for gender put true. Okay, the only error that remains is this error, and we must add a valid name for email. So let's check it again. So it seems to be added to the list. Let's see the accounts again. Yes, added. So let's create another account. For example, I put John instead of Babak. Every account that is added will be added to the end of the list. So let's create another request for deleting the user. Okay, right. Delete user for the name of this request. Then now paste the URL, and first of all, let's add a path parameter. Also, you can send it as a variable like this, write colon and the variable name, and change method type to delete. Okay, it's okay, but we didn't write a code for delete the user. We don't need these methods. We will only use these two methods to delete and update. So here I want to write that if we don't have this sent ID in the list, it will display a message for us. Write exclamation mark here. Now I want to write a message for result of this request. User not found, and the status code must be 404. Here again, I'll change element to user to improve readability in the code. Also write a response code. For example, I put true for success, and a message like removed successfully. In my opinion, we didn't define this method on the page related to the route. Now change update to destroy. Now let's check it again. So my friends, please note that we are not correctly using the database. Every time the server is restarted, the list loses its previous value, and we have to set new values. Don't worry, we will add the database in the next and upcoming videos. Alright guys, I added 2 accounts to the list along with the explanations I gave you. Now let's proceed to check out the deleting feature. Guys, you can add the variable value in the following section or in the URL. For example, I put it in URL, and it seems to delete correctly. Now let's check it in accounts. My dear friends, it's time to write the account update codes together. I've used the patch method to update the account, but you can also use the put method. Copy the validate code related to create account, and to update an account, we must have access to the index of the desired item in the list. So write indexWhere and change element to the user. There is possibility that there's possibility that this code we have written may not find the desired item. In that case, it will return a negative value of 1. So write Babak Code again here. Then we can update the user related to this index. The logical and better approach would have been to make updating account fields optional. However, since this code written for testing purpose, don't take it too seriously for now. We will change it in next and upcoming videos. So let's check it again. Guys, make sure you save all of the requests, and we haven't created the account update request yet. So this request has the same fields as the account creation request, but change for example, I put true for the gender value. Also, I put 2 for ID. And also, if you pay attention, exactly the same as before, after restarting the server, all information will be deleted. And let's add some example again. I've already written these account fields. Let's add them, and then I will update the account with ID 2 in the list, or for example, ID 1, I want to put this data instead of my name. Now let's check it again in accounts request. Okay guys, it changed correctly, but there is a problem. The value type of ID shouldn't be a string type, in my opinion, because the values in the URL parameters are always string type, and the old method returns all variables. The ID that I wrote in the first of the curly brackets will probably be overridden. Make sure you put it in the end of the map values. So guys, since we restarted the server again, we only have one item in the list. And let's update this item. Well, now it works properly, and actually the priority of variables does not matter in the curly brackets. Then you can save this request.